the side hustle has become much more than a trend idea that we see on social media about having a little business on the side, But for many people, it's actually becoming part of how households are surviving. Someone might have a formula job, but also have something on the side because their salary, as you said, it's not enough anymore to cater just for the basics. So if someone needs 3 or 4 income streams just to afford basic necessities, I don't necessarily see that as employment. It can actually be a sign that the primary income isn't providing enough. And it's a sign for you to then think of other ways of generating income. So I think we need to distinguish between entrepreneurship as opportunities and entrepreneurship as a survival.
Africans on Africa.
This episode is for you if you're a Zimbabwean who's also thinking of what is the future of work? Are we at the point where we are at the future of work? And what does that look like? So I read an article by Getrude Chigerwe, who actually was talking about the fact that work in Zimbabwe does not work anymore. And for me, it caught my attention. But also one of the things that it did is that it's something that I actually really agree with. But I think on different points, because for me, when we say work doesn't work, it's actually this assertion that our idea of work has changed, but also what we thought of as employment is not the same. So how do we describe someone who's economically productive in Zimbabwe? But also made me think, how can you as a person be economically productive in Zimbabwe? So these are all the things that we're going to talk about within this episode. And today I have Getrude Chigerwe on the episode. And maybe before we get into the crux of things, I said what I think about why work doesn't work. And at least for you, Getrude, can you just tell us a bit more? But before we get into that, please introduce yourself and tell us who Getrude is.
Thank you so much, Ivan, for having me. I'm Getrude Chigerwe, as you said. I'm a communications expert. I'm a journalist, and I've had an opportunity to work with and for the people, particularly women and girls, throughout my career. I started at UNDP, then moved to UN Women, where I worked in communications and programs. And I'm now taking a different step. And I'm trying to build Imara Communications, where I am a co-founder and also a lead communications consultant there. And at Imara, we provide communications, PR, marketing services and products. So I think that's pretty much who Getrude Chigerwe is.
Yeah, because we are just about to talk about what work is and how work is working in Zimbabwe, and then you come here and then you say I'm a communications expert. I was about to ask what is that, but I think you broke that down a little bit more. And maybe one more question that I would like to ask is, what type of journalism do you do?
I write development stories. So I report on development, national development issues, and also global development, but with a niche on gender equality, women's empowerment, women's rights, and also a bit of youth empowerment.
Amazing. So I got introduced to you by your article that speaks about the fact that work has stopped working in Zimbabwe. And this is something that I was really looking for, when I bumped into your article. But at least for me, what that means, or what I was really centered on, was the fact that work has changed in Zimbabwe, but also with the future of work coming in, Zimbabwe is not ready for that. And the population in Zimbabwe is not ready for how the future of work is designed. So maybe let's start from there. Taking us into your article, what do you mean when you say work has stopped working, specifically thinking of Zimbabwe?
Okay. So firstly, I wrote and published that story on the 30th of April for May Day. And for weeks, I kept asking myself the question that came especially from my own experiences and from the people around me, colleagues, friends, family. The question is having a job still enough to live a decent life? So for a very long time, we were taught to believe in a fairly straightforward formula. You go to school, you get an education, you find a job, you earn a salary, and that salary then allows you to build a stable life. You can pay your rent, put food on the table, take care of your family, and maybe buy a house, educate your children, and have some sort of a degree of financial security. But I think that formula is becoming increasingly difficult, especially for many Zimbabweans. We have people who are educated, people who are employed, but their salaries are not necessarily translating to a decent standard of living. Because the cost of housing has gone up, transport, food, healthcare, education, and it keeps putting pressure on household incomes. So you can technically be employed and still be financially insecure. And that's where I think we need to have a more honest conversation about what we mean when we say someone is employed. Employment is necessarily the same as is it necessarily the same as economic security? Or having a job, is it necessarily have the same impact as having a decent work? So that's really what pushed me into writing the article. And I wasn't asking whether jobs are important. Of course they are. I was just asking whether the kind of work we are creating and the incomes that we come from work to get are actually allowing people to build a dignified and sustained life. And when you look at what people are doing to compensate, you see people taking on side hustles, like freelancing, trading, selling things online, doing informal work, taking multiple generating activities, multiple income generating activities. And I don't necessarily see that as people are lazy to, go to work, put in the effort. In many cases, people are working very hard. They are simply just finding it very difficult to sustain their lives with one income because the salary cannot afford a decent life anymore. So for me, the conversation has to move beyond how many jobs have we created to what kind of jobs are we creating? What do they pay? What protections come with them? And can someone actually build a decent life out of a job and a salary? Because ultimately, work should do more than keep someone occupied. Work should provide dignity. It should provide security. It should give you an opportunity to build a decent life. And that's the conversation that I actually wanted to have with that article.
So many things that I don't even know where to take it for now. But seriously, one of the things that I find very very important is that you took this conversation from May Day, and it got me thinking as well. Is May Day a representation of what work looks like currently, specifically when we think of Zimbabwe? Because May Day celebrates the formal jobs, so to speak, or the space of formalizing jobs, And I'm just wondering, I didn't even watch the May Day celebrations, but also the concept is so British, so that it's so formalized. And I'm just thinking, did it represent what work actually looks like now? I want to keep this aspect of informal work on the side for a bit, but I want to delve into what you found. And you were asking questions around, does work provide dignity for Zimbabwean citizens? If we are thinking of how work is currently in Zimbabwe, is it providing dignity for the Zimbabwean citizen or for the ordinary Zimbabwean?
I think to a certain extent it is, because it provides that cushion of course, the salary is not enough. It's not covering the basics that it used to, or it is supposed to cover. So to a big extent, to a large extent, it is giving you dignity, because also I remember it's not just about getting a salary and come home and cover the basics that you're supposed to cover, but also, when we're growing up, somehow the respect and dignity that you get in a society was also linked even to what you are doing as a profession. So if we put money aside and then say, I'm an executive, I'm a professional, in that note, or if we look at it with that lens, yes, it's still providing the dignity. But in terms of sustaining a household economically, we are speaking of a different ballgame altogether. Because if you are going to work to cover A, B, C, D, and that job is not able to provide the A, B, C, D that you then got that job for, then can we say it's still giving you the dignity it's supposed to give you? So maybe it depends with which lens you want to look at it from. If it's a dignity of being called a professional, a father who has a 9 to 5, or a mother who has a 9 to 5, yes. But in terms of you sustaining your household, I think there's a gap.
I think for me, the conversation takes a bit of a spin, because I think now the dignity is coming from a space where people are saying, you have achieved this and you can do this. You can actually sustain a household with the different things that you know how to do as well. Because I think the script has changed, because dignity used to come from just being what you're saying, an executive or having a job. But now that is not enough, even for you to be a dignified member of the community, And that's why maybe when we started, you also spoke about this script that you go to school, and after you go to school, you graduate and all of that. Graduates are now struggling to find a job, and their qualifications are struggling to match with what the economy of Zimbabwe is like right now. And for me, that brings into conversation the question that, at least for me, okay, let me respond to it first. Degrees are not enough. Graduating is not enough. And holding that degree has not proved to be effective for most of the people within the Zimbabwean current economy that we have. I don't know what you think.
Okay, so interestingly, yesterday I was listening to BBC, and something that they were discussing really resonate with what I had written in that article. So you'll find that it's not only a Zimbabwean problem, because they were talking about with UK Form 6 results being released, there was a discussion on what then happens next to these young people. They've finished school, and many of them will be looking into getting into universities, eventually entering the workforce, right? But what space is actually waiting for them in the labor market? So you realize this is not just for Zimbabwe. Probably it's a global trend which is happening right now. And that question really connects to what I was exploring in that article, because the labor market has changed. It has shrinked almost everywhere, and it has become more competitive and more uncertain. And in many cases, that traditional pathway that we are talking about, go to school, get an education, get employed, it's no longer straightforward as it used to be, And for a long time, we essentially told young people, work hard at school, get a qualification, and those qualifications will help you to get a job, right? And once you get that job, you expect a salary to to give you some sort of stability and dignity, as we were discussing, to pay you rent, to support the family. But what happens when thousands of young people are entering a labor market every year, and the number of decent, stable jobs keeps on shrinking? It's not growing at the same pace. And this poses a serious concern, not only for Zimbabwe, but let's talk about Zimbabwe for now. Zimbabwe's own data really shows the scale of the it shows the scale of the challenge. A report, I think it was by the official Zimbabwe Statistics Agency, if I'm not mistaken, they estimated that every year Zimbabwe produces 30,000 graduates, right? So that means for the next decade, we need to create 185,000 jobs. And where are those jobs where are those jobs going to be created when the job market itself keeps on shrinking? Then unemployment among young adults, this is up to the age of 24 years. Some of them are fresh out of college, but the unemployment rate has also gone up. So when we are talking about these young people who have just received their Form 6 results, who are fresh out of college, I think we have to also ask, what kind of a labor market are we preparing them for? Because if we continue telling young people to acquire qualifications, but the economy isn't creating enough opportunities to absorb those qualifications, then maybe we have to acknowledge that the formula has changed. And that's where things like entrepreneurship, freelancing, informal economy, and multiple streams of income then come into the conversation. But I don't think we should romanticize that either, though. But I think that's the reality on the ground.
I actually agree with you. The world has moved, but I think the world has shifted. But if you look at Africa, and specifically if you think of Zimbabwe, two things have happened. While the world has been shifting, our ways of interacting with that aspect of the fourth industrial revolution that has shaken the world have not advanced at a pace that's fast enough. So we still have the script that, okay, school and then you work and then everything. But that has not been the ideal script that the world has been using. But I think while Africa has been left and while Africa was being left, something happened in that shift. There started to be an informal sector that started to rise, right? And this informal sector responded to the gaps that happened in terms of the world having shifted. So the World Bank talks about the informal sector is a major economic force in Africa. It actually absorbs nearly 83% of the total employment of the continent. And in sub-Saharan Africa, it absorbs about 85% of the employed population. Now, if you look at Zimbabwe, it's roughly 75 to 85% of the total employment that is absorbed by the informal sector. And the informal sector currently in Zimbabwe, it is actually driving 60% of economic activity within Zimbabwe, right? So what is this informal sector that absorbs? If we are having all those 3,000, you said 3,000 or 3,000 graduates a year, but 60% of the economy is driven by the informal sector. Are we saying now because in my opinion, there's a mismatch now between the qualifications that or there's a misalignment between the qualifications that are being produced and the work that is done, or what the market is actually requiring. And this is where we see a gap, that we have all these degrees and we have all these professions, but the market does not require that. Then we have high unemployment. I don't know what you think.
Okay, so I didn't get, was it a question? I didn't get exactly what you're asking.
So for me, I'm essentially saying the world shifted, like what you're saying, but as the world is shifting, right? Our ways of learning and entering into the job market haven't changed in Zimbabwe. And while this has not changed, the fourth industrial revolution has come, and the future of work, so to speak, is here. So we are producing degrees and conventional methods of learning that are not equipped to sustain the market or to respond to the market. And this is why we have high informal employment that is there within the Zimbabwean market. And if we continue doing what we are doing, then Zimbabwe will not be ready to respond to the market or provide people that are ready to function in the market.
Okay. So maybe if I hear you correctly, it's the conversation now is around, are we producing the correct qualifications that will match the informal market, and also the market itself, the job market, and the qualifications that are being produced. There's a misalignment, right?
Yes, because if we are saying 60% of the economy, if we are saying 60% of the economy is driven by informal trade or informal employment, right? But what is being brought out at universities or with the school system that we have, it misaligns with what is making money in Zimbabwe. So we will have high unemployment. So does it work to go to school, actually? I think that's where I'm getting it. Does it work to go to school? Or we have to do trades and start hustle schools or start...
I hear you. No,
I had to get around to get to that.
Yeah. I completely understand where you are coming from. But I still believe very strongly in education, though. I just don't think we can continue promising young people. Because it will give you something to fall back on. 1, 2, it will, education is still incredibly important because it gives people knowledge, skills, critical thinking, credentials, and a cushion, as I said. A cushion
But sorry, Gertrude, you are saying education should be a cushion. Remember, education should be the first thing, right? You can't go to school for 15 years, 20 years to have a backup. The hustle should be the backup. And do you understand what I'm saying? And I understand that's the reality of what is there right now in Zimbabwe. But how can your degree be a backup? Shouldn't that be the thing that should be the first plan? And then a backup is the hustle, or you create a hustle out of that.
Okay, so if you listened, I said the backup came as the last point. So the first point was to give you the skills, to even operate in that informal sector, right? And I also mentioned critical thinking. And then I then mentioned the opportunities as a fallback plan, right? And you're correctly asking if the opportunities if the opportunities should be a cushion or not, because we were told education should give you a job. But then we are saying that formula does not work anymore, considering the context and what is happening. So it might not be now, but whenever the job markets then re-expand, if you have a qualification, then you stand a better chance, And what has changed is our expectations of what education is supposed to lead, what education is supposed to lead to, not the importance or the relevance of education. So for a very long time, the expectation was almost linear. As we said, it was just one formula: go to school, get a qualification, get a job, and that job will give you a stable income and reasonably secure life, right? But I think that pathway is still valuable, but it's no longer guaranteed. You can do everything you are told to do, go to school, get a degree, blah, 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 and still find yourself struggling to make ends meet or to find a job. So my argument isn't about the relevance of the education, but rather rethinking what education prepares people for. So education shouldn't only prepare someone to become an employee. It should also give you the skills to create value, to solve problems, to move with the time, to move with industrial shifts, and ultimately to create employment and economic opportunities for others. And that's where the side hustle comes in. I think the side hustle has become much more than a trend idea where that we see on social media about having a little business on the side, But for many people, it's actually becoming part of how households are surviving. Someone might have a formal job, but also have something on the side because their salary, as we said, it's not enough anymore to cater just for the basics. So if someone needs 3 or 4 income streams just to afford basic necessities, I don't necessarily see that as employment. It can actually be a sign that the primary income isn't providing enough. And it's a sign for you to then think of other ways of generating income. So I think we need to distinguish between entrepreneurship as opportunities and entrepreneurship as a survival. If I start a business because I have identified a gap in the market and I have access to capital, I have the skills, I understand my customers, and I have the opportunity to make money, to grow, to also create employment. That's different from starting a small business because my salary cannot get me through the month. So both people are entrepreneurs, but the circumstances are different. So perhaps the new formula is education plus multiple pathways to economic security.
Something that a problem that I have with that is that entrepreneurship is so broad. I think it's just a fancy word for us to actually say informal economy, right? Because it's so broad that someone who owns a telecommunications company, for example, is an entrepreneur, but also someone who is hustling and selling everything is also respectfully so, an entrepreneur as well. But also, I think one of the things that it represents that you're talking about is this assertion of that as African countries, and I'll lean towards Zimbabwe specifically, we are not optimizing the talent that we have created. We have created a lot of talent and a lot of resources have been put into developing people and educating them and training them for skills, which the first thing might be, okay, as I said before, it might not be relevant to what the market requires currently. I don't know. But also the second thing is that those skills that we have already, like what you said, one of the first bases of education is providing knowledge and skills. We are not optimizing them. We are not using them rightfully. Even if the world moves, we have to strategically use those skills in a correct way. I'm also saying this because I think it was the World Economic Forum that spoke about. I'll flight the results if when I find them, but they spoke about how African countries specifically are not good at optimizing the skills that they have, and it's so bad that if you look at that chart, we only have, I think it's Mauritius who is at, I think it's at 67% of optimizing the skills that they have and skills that they have trained for. And you can't find Zimbabwe on that list. You can't find Zimbabwe on that list and other African countries because we are not doing enough to optimize the skills that we have, or actually use the skills that we have provided people with in the education system that we have, which begs the question of, I think this is where Zimbabwe is also going, because I think it gives rise to this aspect of there is now the digital economy and there's now the online world, and everybody's trying to fit within that market now. And I guess my question is this the new market now in response to the survival that you spoke about? Or do we actually have a digital market, or has Zimbabwe actually shifted into a digital economy or a digital market that is based on online work or the digital trade?
Okay. I'll answer with, in the back of my mind, with the question: is the informal workspace embrace the digital era? Because, as we say, the job market is shrinking, and it has then left a lot of students who are just coming from graduating to then come and look for a job, and then they can't find that job. So as survival, they then end up, being in the informal workspace. So I'll answer that question with that in the back of my mind. So I would say this is actually why I am very quite optimistic about Zimbabweans and the fourth industrial revolution, the digital era. Because sometimes we talk about the fourth industrial revolution as though it is something that is going to arrive one day with the artificial intelligence and but people are already participating in it in very ordinary ways, but we are already participating in it. So the informal trader is using WhatsApp to reach customers in another city, right? We are doing online transactions. They are using Facebook to market their products. They are using digital tools to manage their business. So I think that already shows you that we are already participating in the digital economy. We are already participating in the digital era. I also don't want us to talk about the digital divide as though digitalization is something that is only happening now in the urban areas, or because I think that's the thinking a lot of people have, that the whole digital era is happening in the urban areas only and not in rural areas. But there are really interesting things happening even in the rural areas, and it shows you the coverage and how people have embraced the digital era. So let me give you an example of, if you know Terence Maporosa, or a place called Kwateri. It's very popular on Facebook.
Yeah.
So Terence Maporosa is a really good example, because he has taken what could traditionally be seen as a very rural business and used digital platforms to build a much bigger brand and reach customers beyond his immediate community. So his journey started in agriculture after he struggled to get a job. Despite having a political science degree, he struggled to get a job. And he then used social media to market his poetry business. And he grew the business to what it is today. And it's no longer Kwateri from Mondoro or for Zimbabweans. It's now a global brand. And then you look at, I don't know if you have heard about the Go mobile app, which I think is another really fascinating example of how Zimbabweans have embraced the digital era, even in the rural areas. So the Go is a Zimbabwean agricultural technology platform designed for farmers in rural areas to access information that they might struggle to get. So this information includes like the crop information, market prices, weather patterns, farming calendars, and importantly, some of those tools are designed to work offline in case you have limited access to the internet, right? So this then shows you that we are already embracing the digital era. So when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, digital era, AI, I think we need to broaden our imaginations. It's only about someone sitting in, it's not only about someone sitting in an office in Harare or in Gweru or in an urban setup. Zimbabweans have been embracing it and they've been using it. And that's why I'm actually quite optimistic about Zimbabweans and that they can embrace the fourth industrial revolution in full swing, and we may have infrastructure gaps, we may have connectivity challenges, and we may not even have the systems that other countries have. But our Zimbabweans are already demonstrating their ability to adapt technology to their circumstances.
I just want to be a bit of a devil's advocate there. Are we actually creating, or are we just adopting to this shift or this digital shift? Fair and fine, we have a lot of people who are joining online companies and working for online companies, or using resources like Facebook or other digital resources. But I also think we are not doing enough of the creation. The go up that you're talking about is also something that is important in terms of creating and actually doing something that is designed for the population within the Zimbabwean context. I think I just have a problem of us continually adopting, but we are not in a space of creating. Does that make sense? Because I think in creation of digital resources is where we are responding to solutions that are uniquely address our problems. For example, I can give an example of Uber, right? Uber has not really made it into Zimbabwe because card systems and all these other aspects are not really that integrative into the Zimbabwean market. And then there's InDrive as an example, which has made it further because of the cash economy that is in Zimbabwe. But also I think those are moments of us responding and creating solutions. I know there are other apps that have been created that are specifically suited to Zimbabwe. So I think for me, the creation part is what I'm looking for more, and what we have to invest in more. Rather than adopting. Adopting is fine, but also adopting has a challenge that we currently have. I know Zimbabwe is one of the countries in Africa that have the greatest coverage in terms of internet. I think about 40 to 45% of Zimbabweans have internet coverage, and that has moved significantly high. I think in about 2015, we had less than 20% of Zimbabwe who had internet coverage. So you can see the development that has happened in a very short space of time. But balancing that is we need to create digital resources that are really conducive to our context and provide solutions for our people, and do that more than the adopting part. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so now we are creating, we are trying to create, but also we are adopting, like you say, to the fourth industrial revolution per se. And this might be a tricky question, and probably not much of a fair question to ask you, but I'll ask it anyway. So why is it there's so much high brain drain within Zimbabwe? Like a lot of talent that has been created, a lot of talent that has been produced in Zimbabwe results in loss of that talent due to brain drain, with people going to South Africa, going to UK and other countries. Why is there so much brain drain if we are embracing the industrial revolution, so to speak?
Okay. Brain drain. I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I have the capacity to answer that question, but I'll try. Um, I'll try to speak from my own perspective, not as an expert, but as just as Getrude. I don't know what that means. If we are asking whether Zimbabwe has enough space for its young people that have skills, we also have to ask what happens when the people we have educated decide then to go elsewhere to look for opportunities. And I don't blame people for leaving, honestly. If you have invested in your education, you have acquired skills, and you can't find an opportunity that gives you a decent livelihood, it is completely understandable that you would look beyond Zimbabwe. I mean, people have families to support the future that they want to build. The challenge is that collectively, if these people leave Zimbabwe, does that pose a problem for the country? It does. That's the challenge. We invest in educating people, they acquire experiences and skills, and then other economies benefit from that human capital. We have seen this particularly in professions such as even the healthcare, the education industry, the engineering, and other highly skilled fields, not just the tech field. So, and Zimbabwe's own labor migration policy has historically recognized the scale of skilled migration, and it's contributing to a very huge gap. But I also think we need to change the way we talk about the diaspora. I don't necessarily see every Zimbabwean who lives as a loss. If you want to be honest, many Zimbabweans abroad are doing extraordinary things and are acquiring skills, technologies, networks, and experiences that can ultimately benefit Zimbabwe. How do we turn brain drain into brain circulation? How do we create ways for Zimbabweans in the diaspora to invest, mentor, collaborate, transfer knowledge, create businesses, maybe teach virtually, support innovation, participate in Zimbabwe's development even when they are not physically here? So interestingly, Zimbabwe is beginning to move in that direction. I was going to say the government launched a diaspora skills database, if I'm not mistaken, last year in December, and it was specifically launched to identify Zimbabweans abroad and create mechanisms for skills transfer and partnership, investment, and other forms of contribution that they can make towards the development of the economy. So there's also now the Zimbabwe Global, I don't remember the correct term, but it was also launched this year, which is designed to coordinate international labor migration while trying to ensure that overseas placements contribute to domestic skills and development. So perhaps the conversation shouldn't be how do we stop Zimbabweans from leaving? Because to be honest, people are not going to stay if they don't find opportunities. I don't know if I'm making sense. So how do we make Zimbabwe a place people can choose to stay? And how do we maintain a meaningful relationship with those that have already left? Because if Zimbabweans leave and succeed globally, we can't automatically see that as if the country is losing. If that person is mentoring young Zimbabweans, investing back home, transferring skills, maybe starting a company, creating jobs, or collaborating with institutions, then there's still a connection between their success and the development of the country.
I think importantly, I have to say, I didn't know about this this skills audit, this diaspora skills audit. I also flighted here, and I think it's really an important asset. I'm just looking at it now, and I think it's an important effort in terms of getting that brain drain reversed, because there's a lot of effort that Zimbabwe has put into educating people and creating these skills. But I think with what has happened in terms of the economy shifting, but also the globe moving, we have seen that that gap that we were talking about, right? And for me, we are always talking about entrepreneurship, and it's a positive thing. But there are people who are not entrepreneurs. I don't have an entrepreneurial mind, And in some cases, there are people in Zimbabwe who have to become entrepreneurs, like we said, for survival. But to accommodate, okay, if also 60% of the economy is being driven by the informal sector, you have to be involved in the hustle economy. It's a good thing. It's an amazing thing if we look at Africans creating their own market, but also Africans doing their own hustle and doing their own thing. But it's not everybody who has a hustle mindset. So I think that contributes to people leaving, but also that contributes to people having these great skills and leaving with these great skills, which is not entirely in its own a bad thing. But also, I think it's important to bring those people and create a space for them so that these two parts of the economy can actually speak together. I think resources like this are resources that are important in terms of alerting to people, but also communicating, specifically when people are not in Zimbabwe, seeing how they can use these resources and start journeying back to building the economy back in Zim and being involved in the economy back in Zim. And it brings me to, I think, to something that brings this all together in terms of the conversation that we had. So how can a person who is watching this and thinking, I'm about to graduate, or I'm about to go to varsity even, or I'm about to try to enter the economy, how can they secure a place in tomorrow's economy, or even thinking not of tomorrow's economy, in the current economy that we have in Zimbabwe?
That's a difficult question. That's a difficult question because I'm also looking for the same advice. I'm also looking for the same advice. But what I can say is the government is trying. Yeah, the government is trying really to prepare people. So there are different and several strategies and policies that were launched in recent years, if not months.
Like which ones?
I know there's an AI strategy, and I'll look it up and share with you. But I know there's an AI strategy which was launched recently, National Artificial Intelligence Strategy, that talks about digital transformation. And there are also initiatives around developing software developers and digital skills. So clearly there's an understanding that the world is moving towards that direction. But then do people have... let me think about what are the policies and other things that the government is doing. Okay. In ICT policies, and the government is also heading towards mainstreaming ICT and digital skills throughout education levels. That is primary, secondary, and tertiary. And also there are some tangible efforts, a lot of tangible efforts to ensure that we prepare Zimbabweans for the next 4 IRA. That's the 4th Industrial Revolution, right? And then through the Ministry of ICT, the government is also working hard to improve connectivity for schools in remote areas to ensure that e-learning is prioritized and incorporated in the education sector. And then the government has also launched commissioned ICT hubs in different provinces countrywide, and I think it's still underway as part of efforts to accelerate digital transformation in schools, with a primary focus on schools in remote areas, and they are ensuring that no person or no one is left behind, starting with the furthest and remotest areas. And then there's also support to disadvantaged schools and disadvantaged communities. So you look at UN agencies like UNICEF, they've handed over laptops and other ICT equipment so that they can, rural communities can, especially the primary schools and secondary schools, they can build infrastructures for ICT. And then there's rural digital skills. The National ICT Policy also explicitly calls for training the rural population to use modern technological devices and services. So all these things, why am I mentioning them? I am mentioning them to say the efforts are there. So for young people, going back to the question that you have asked, for young people, you have to research. You have to know what's happening around you and tap into it and leverage on all these policies, on all these activities and efforts that the government is putting towards ensuring that everyone is prepared for the fourth industrial revolution. I don't know if I've answered your question. I think
No, no, you have, and I think something that's important that's coming from way back when when we were going with the conversation is this assertion that the future of work is just a metaphor, because the future of work is already here, and it is important to be able as an individual to embrace it, using the skills that you have acquired through education, but also dabbing into other aspects of the world. Like I studied psychology as an example, but I cannot sit around and say AI does not affect me. Because if it doesn't affect me, if I say it doesn't affect me, it's going to impact me negatively. So I think being able to be participants in the future of work that is already here is really important for everyone, and for everyone to be engaged in that. And it's important to know that these resources are there. But I think sometimes it's also this assertion of, do people know where to get these resources? Do people know where to get this information? If it wasn't for this conversation, I wouldn't have known about this portal that you mentioned. But also, there are other aspects that are resources that benefit to get the economy together and get different people from the informal sector and the formal sector working together in a productive way. That's not being disseminated well, or can be disseminated better to get to the ground. But I don't know, where can people get more information? How can people get more educated into how to utilize their skills for the future of work that we have currently?
before I answer the question around access to information and where can people get that information, I just wanted to highlight that from the outside, right, from a distance, we can sometimes look at Zimbabwe and think it's lagging behind technologically or economically. But I think that that picture can be misleading, because if you look at us as Zimbabwe, we have produced people who are doing amazing, amazing work globally, in technology, in science, in finance, fintech, innovations, even the creative industry. And they are already contributing to the fourth industrial revolution. And those people were produced here in Zimbabwe. I won't even start to name
Actually,
because the list is very long.
I actually don't think, though, sorry, that Zimbabwe is not tech savvy, or is not advanced in terms of tech. I think some of the things that I've mentioned is that I think between 2015 and 2025, we've seen a huge leap in terms of access to technology, access to devices, and dissemination of technology within Zimbabwe. But also, we have seen, I think there's a data point that I was talking to that speaks to the fact that if you look within the African continent, Zimbabwe is one of the populations that actually have a 40% plus of the population that has access to technology. And I know 40% does not seem like a lot, but if you think of the rural population that is in Zimbabwe being the greatest part of the population in Zimbabwe, you'd actually see the penetration of technology and the internet and resources to those population. So I think if anybody thinks that Zimbabwe is left behind in terms of technology, I think it's just that narrative of Africa or Zimbabwe being left behind, but there is a lot of tech integration that has happened within Zimbabwe. Sorry, I just wanted to bring that up as well.
Okay, that's fine. So you were asking about where can people get information on things like the policies and what's happening around them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so for those who have a smartphone and network coverage, internet should be your best friend. Of which it's far-fetched, so I won't go deeper on that. Then we have community radio stations. So I think we now have several community radio stations across the country that people can leverage on for such information. I know UNESCO played a very big role in putting those community radio stations across the country, and they usually share such important information. So that's one platform that people can also leverage on in terms of getting the information. And then we have even national radios. People should just grow the habit of listening to news and other current affair programs. They will get the information from there. And then we have innovation hubs. I know UN Women also have put a few knowledge hubs across the country, including at universities. I'm not sure about remote communities, but with the innovation hubs that we were talking about earlier, I'm sure they can also get such information. I think all the ministry have district offices. So maybe if you want information on youth empowerment, you should look for such information from the district office for the Ministry of Youth. The same applies to the Ministry of Women Affairs, Ministry of ICT. Then you can get the information. Where else? National TV. The same applies again. People should grow the habit of listening to news, current affairs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think basically those are the platforms that you can easily access that kind of information.
I think essentially it's this the thirst to research, the thirst for knowledge, and just embracing the resources that are availed to us. But thank you so much, Gertrude, for hanging out with me today. I think this was quite informative, and I hope people also find it as informative as well. Please go on Medium and also read on Gertrude's work. I find a lot of her work very powerful in terms of gender equality, but also empowerment within the Zimbabwean society as well. But also go to Substack and read the African Narrative, where we tell these stories as Africans on Africa podcast as well. But if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel and share, but also like and engage with the conversation that we had today with Getrude as well. These are very small steps, but they get great strides in terms of giving the podcast extra mileage. See you on the next one.
Africans on Africa.